What up, FinTech fam, and welcome to another episode of Humans of Fintech. Today, we have a very special episode for you, a celebration of not just FinTech, but of community, innovation, and the power of storytelling. Now, this episode was recorded live at my book launch party in October in New York City, an incredible evening shared with about 100 of the fiercest leaders in FinTech, who all gathered to honor the release of my book, FinTech Feminists. Now, the energy in the room was electric, and I couldn't have asked for a better setting to share this incredible milestone. Now, to make the evening even more extraordinary, I flipped the script, and instead of interviewing a guest, the roles were reversed. Now, our guest interviewer is none other than the phenomenal Amy Nauiokas, founder and CEO of Anthemis, a complete trailblazer in fintech investing and someone whose visionary leadership has profoundly shaped the future of our industry. Amy is known for championing inclusive innovation and pushing boundaries, so it felt only fitting to have her lead this conversation. Together, we dive into the stories behind the book, reflect on the evolving fintech landscape, and share some personal insights on what it takes to thrive in this dynamic space. So, settle in and get ready for an inspiring and candid discussion with the Amy Nauiokas, one that I'm so thrilled to share with you all. Let's dive in. I am so excited to bring to the stage an absolute icon, a legend in fintech. If you don't know her yet, you are definitely about to. Please welcome to the stage a dear friend, an incredible story that is featured in the book, the founder and CEO of Anthemis, VC legend, Amy Nauiokas.
Thank you, first of all, for that amazing introduction. It was very thoughtful and very sweet.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being
I
here.
have lots of rules, and we'll talk about some of them tonight, but I have two of my sort of favorite rules that I thought I would start off with today. And the first is when someone puts their heart and soul into writing a book, which is not an easy job, we throw a party. And so thank you all for coming up tonight to throw a party for this one.
Thank you.
And the second thing, and this is kind of a rule that I'll live and die by, when a person, particularly a woman, spends their entire career showing up for and lifting the voices of women, we celebrate the crap out of her. And so I am so honored to be here to do that tonight for you, Nicole, and with you, and we're gonna have a little fun. And Nicole, I hope she's been really really grateful to her for sort of encouraging my inner Oprah Winfrey tonight, because this is a woman that interviews everybody, and she doesn't often get the camera or the mic turned on her. So I'm gonna try to figure out if I know how to do an interview. But in the meantime, we're gonna try to have the tone tonight will be very casual. The one thing that I will say about Nicole as interviewers go is that she is one of the very few people that can get to the heart of the question and the hard questions and the hard conversations, but do it in a way that puts you both at ease and makes it feel quite effortless. So I think, as much as she said she'd let me interview her tonight, my guess is it's going to be a lot of back and forth, but we'll give it a try. All right. So first off, obviously I've read the book. It was phenomenal.
She read the book in a weekend, so
It is possible.
Yeah.
I want to first point out and compliment you on the massive undertaking, right? Like at any given point, you could have written this book about women in financial services, the history of financial services, the history of fintech and women, a bunch of case studies about some great women doing some great things, your own journey, all the stats and figures. You didn't do any of those things. You did all of those things.
Oh, thank you.
And that's, I think, a pretty exciting thing. So I want to start by kind of just sort of, on the basis that you could have filled a book alone with any of those topics, what was your motivation and the why of why you went this big and this bold and what you were hoping to accomplish by doing it?
Yes. Outside of word count, contracts, and necessities. Just kidding. The backstory of that is that I asked my book editor, who is here, in the audience to if I could lower the word count. Yes, she is. Thank you, Judith. Shout out to Judith and Wiley team. But the funny backstory of that is that I asked to do less words, and then I turned in 90,000 words when I was supposed to do like 70,000. But anyways, but to get to the question, for me, you have to understand the history of what is going on to properly circumvent an issue, to properly address it. You know, I think in our industry, there are many things I address in the book that are problems, like the myth of meritocracy.
Yep.
The, the thought that, oh, well, you know, there are women CEOs, or there are women in powerful positions today, or there are wealthy women out there. What problems are there? Like, quit whining, right? Why are you complaining? There's nothing in this book that is about complaining. It is the history that you need to know to fundamentally understand that if anyone says those type of things to you, especially the female founders in this room and in FinTech who I know because I've interviewed you, those things have been said to you, I want you to know that if anyone says that to you, they are robbing you of the ability to truly move forward, to truly become a success, because they're purposefully trying to keep you in that trap of things are a meritocracy. Yeah. We're fine. Yeah. You know, look at that female CEO or that female CEO. You know what also I'm seeing this year is a bunch of female CEOs leaving FinTech companies. Yeah. I've seen a lot of women founders this year close their business. So there's a very real history here. On the other side of it, there's also a history of women fundamentally building the rails of FinTech.
Yeah, and that actually, I'm gonna read a quote from the book.
This is wild.
Grace Hopper, Margaret Hamilton, Ada Lovelace, and Maggie Walker, to name a few, were the architects of the digital age, but their stories are buried beneath the narrative that insists on maintaining the status quo. We see it in articles today all day long, from mainstream media highlighting men as the leaders of the digital financial revolution, ignoring the contributions of women who have been quietly pulling the strings from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. Women have been writing codes, breaking barriers, and building empires in finance and technology for ages. So first of all, if any of those names are not familiar to anybody in this room, not only are you reading this book, but you need to do a little history lesson, because we should know who all of those women are, and there are some real powerhouses in that list. But even beyond that, and more recently, right, like, you know, Muriel Siebert, the first woman to own a seat at the stock exchange, Juanita Krebs, the first female director of New York Stock Exchange, and I don't think she's here tonight, but Betsy Cohen, right, the first woman CEO and chair of a bank in 1974. These women have paved a path that is unique not just to financial services, but unique to financial technology. And it sort of struck me when I read that, which I did know a lot of this already, but it struck me that is a thing, right? And so, you know, I was thinking that I wanted to ask you why you thought it was the case that so many women chose financial technology as their path forward. And in the sort of, I was thinking about the Kate Bush song, A Woman's Work, right? So why is FinTech women's work?
Because women are the half of the global population. They are half of entrepreneurs today. They receive 2% of venture capital funding for the businesses, so half of those entrepreneurs are receiving just a small portion of funding to even build those businesses. And then their media representation is only a quarter of the time. So when you dissect that, you see, so not only are we not represented in media as leaders, but our businesses are also not getting funded. There's this cycle, this pattern that now shows us that women are being basically relegated to the sidelines in a way that means we're not getting the capital we need to build those businesses that build solutions that women uniquely need, right?
But it's interesting too, though, because I was trying to reflect on my own story of how I found my way into FinTech in the early mid-90s before FinTech was a thing, right? And that the passage in the book about those early adopters were really resonated with me, because I really felt this sort of kinship in knowing that you know, it is and can be exhausting being the one and only in a lot of rooms. And most of the folks in this room, I can tell by age, haven't yet experienced, or hopefully will never have to experience, the exhaustion of being the one and only. You'll probably be, two of only, maybe three of only, but you don't have to be one of only anymore. And there's a lot of work that went before you to do that. But for me, that exhaustion and frankly, the humiliation of being not wanted, not appreciated, not respected, ignored in the sort of big room of Wall Street or the big room of business. I found FinTech because it was the thing over to the side that nobody was doing.
Right.
And I could actually quietly and thoughtfully plan my game.
The Trojan horse strategy.
Right.
Which is a part of the book as
absolutely.
well. There is something strategic. I relate it to things that, women like Oprah, speaking of Oprah, women like Beyonce, outside of our fintech and financial services realm, they put in the work to be very strategic in the way that they built their careers to a certain point to where they always knew that they were going to pay it forward.
Yep.
And there are folks out there that are like, what do I have to build a business and be an activist for? And it's like, this is not, sure, but this is activism with profit. This is activism that builds businesses that fundamentally shape the global economy, that fundamentally shape the fabric of our society. That's why women need to be in fintech. This is so many times while on my journey of writing this book, of creating FinTech is Femme, of writing my newsletter, people have been like, hey, Nicole, do you maybe you should just drop FinTech and just write about women since you care about women so much. These are things said to me. And I'm like, you're missing the point, clearly, because to remove FinTech would mean that we're not centering around the fact that women need to be in the rooms to create the products that help more women build, accumulate, and fund wealth.
Yeah.
Because that's what the men are doing. That's the cycle that currently exists. Why aren't we creating that cycle, new systems and patterns?
Yeah. I'm sort of stuck in this history space, and I had a wonderful opportunity to meet Betsy a couple of years ago, which I can't believe that it took this long for me to meet her. And the first thing I said, and I'm pointing this out because you said it in your opening and you said it again now, the first thing I said to her when I got in that room was, thank you. Mm-hmm. And I said, thank you, Betsy, for doing whatever you did to make a small opening for me in the 90s to find my way in.
Yep.
And I think it's important. And actually, Sally's another one. Like Sally, when I was first coming up, was, she was the woman who had made it on Wall Street. The one woman who had made it on Wall Street. So, as a young woman in the 90s, it was wow. And so 10 years ago, we met for the first time. And again, first thing I did was say thank you. And it can be a little, people get sort of embarrassed sometimes when you do that. But I just think it's important for us to recognize the shoulders that we're all standing on. Absolutely. Because this has not been a singular game. This is a community, and the community you're building is what will help propel us forward. And I was sort of, why do you think it's so hard for women to support and thank other women? I know you have a very strong feeling from this.
I think because of the societal structures and systemic issues around things that are schemes like imposter syndrome. Actually, if you're subscribed to my newsletter, hope you are, if you're in this room, I wrote about it tonight for my column this evening. What ends up happening is because as women, we buy into this belief of imposter syndrome, which is fake, by the way. That's not real. That doesn't exist. Thank you. Then what ends up happening is you internalize that. And if you think you're an imposter and you're not, even though you're in that room, you are that CMO, you are that CEO, you raise that money. The amount of women that I meet that are doing incredible things, that still second guess themselves every step of the way, me guilty, still do that is baffling. Yeah. And it's because we internalize imposter syndrome. So then if we don't think we're good enough, how dare we ever think another woman is? Yeah. You have no idea that the things that you internalize, that's exactly what you're going to project, right, onto other women. And so then I think there's that. I think at the end of the day, we need to all be, right, incredibly, ridiculously grateful for every single woman like Betsy, like the Adas, like the Muriel Sieberts, because like you said, we do not move forward unless someone is willing to go through the hardship. Even yourself. Amy was my third podcast interview that I ever did. And Sally Krawcheck was one of the first interviews I did when I was at Investment News before starting FinTech is Femme, and hearing women like you who had been through it, right, who were open and vulnerable. I think that's the other thing.
Yeah.
like to pretend like everything's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No. And we're going to talk about vulnerability
Anyway,
because you get so there's a line in the book somewhere that I'll find it because I think I pulled the quote about sort of not recognizing that each and every one of us, because, and by the way, the brilliant rebranding to the sort of humans of fintech, that we are first human and we are women, but we have to start seeing the human part of each other. Right. And I think if we can sort of try to see one's humanity and see ourselves in the other person, we'll have a much better shot at actually being there to lift up the community versus break it down. And I think another thing you talk about in the book, I think there's a quick quote on perfection. Right? So women have been subjected to various false narratives that aim to limit their potential and encourage them to strive for unrealistic standards of perfection. Instead of being courageous, society has conditioned women to pursue perfection, which is ultimately unattainable. I love that you wrote it, but let's take a second on that. It is impossible to be perfect. I was in I think it was, it was like late 90s, and I think it was Helena Morrissey who was doing a speech or a kind of panel on kind of the idea of superwomen, and there were a handful of women on there, and everybody, 4 or 5 of them before they got to Helena, that were all saying, yes, well, I'm a superwoman because of this and that and the other thing, and they got to her, and she just kind of looked and said, and I'll always remember this, she goes, well, I don't actually think there's such a thing as superwoman. Yeah. And I think every woman in this room knows this, that if you're having an A+ day at work and you are just rocking, when you go home, something's going to hit the, what, it's going to be an F, if you're lucky, F+ day at home, and vice versa, right? If you're just rocking it with your kids or with your partner and your friends, and then you kind of walk in and something's going to blow up at work, right? There's no striving for perfection only suffers to pull us further apart.
Right. And it hinders progress, right?
Absolutely.
Because then you're not taking action. If you're always striving for perfect, then there's no progress that is made. And the reality is that the women in our history of the finance and tech ecosystem have shown us that progress is absolutely possible. And if you've seen Stuff's the musical, you know what I'm about to say next, which is, but progress is not guaranteed, right? So it's the daily action. It's what you do every single day. It's the way that you talk to another woman. It's the way that you fight for another woman. There are women in this room right now who I know literally go to their bosses and fight for me, and fight to work with me, and put in, and that's crazy that it's a fight, because come on. Anyways, but come on. Anyways, I got the numbers, but as we know, that's not necessarily what matters. But that is exactly what we need to be doing for each other, because if we're not doing it for someone else, then it's not going to happen for us.
Yeah.
And if it does happen for us, sure, you could be great and you can become super successful, but you're going to look in the mirror one day and not know who that person is, right? Or not be surrounded by a community that makes you feel authentically you. And I think to something that you said, and to go back really quickly on the imposter syndrome element, we have to, and something that I do in this book is we have to fundamentally challenge the narratives that have been told to us forever. That was what this book was, is me, and there are so many tears, writing this thing, so many, I think I went through all the stages of grief that you possibly could go through, because I was uncovering all of this, right? As a young woman, I'm only 30 years old, I know, don't look a day over 25, but that you have to have that reckoning a bit with what is actually going on, take the rose color lenses off, and then you have a clear pathway to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel the last, certainly, that is great.
Thank you.
I rose-colored glasses off, ladies. I feel the last 10 years there's been a lot of chat about women asking for what they deserve, and asking for what they're worth, and asking for what they want, and asking for what they need. And I think that needed to happen, and we absolutely, but I hope that this conversation starts to change around this topic of vulnerability and being human, and raising one another up rather than breaking one another down. I think I found the quote of, in challenging situations, it's crucial to recognize that we may all be operating from a place of trauma or stress. However, taking it out on those vulnerable positions only perpetuates the cycle of negativity. Instead, let's work together to uplift one another and create a more inclusive and supportive environment. This is the core of the abundance mindset. I think that's great.
Thank you.
I think that's great.
This is the greatest thing to ever happen to me, by the way. The fact that Amy Nauiokas is reading my book to me, I'm like, should she read the whole thing?
Well, I know. I should just read it. I'm gonna.
Story time?
Speaking of, I was listening to. Do you listen to Wiser Than Me, Julie Louis-Dreyfus?
No, should I?
Oh,
Someone does.
Oh my God,
Hillary does.
Best podcast out there. So
Okay.
Julie Louis-Dreyfus, Elaine from Seinfeld, and all the other things, has this amazing podcast that she launched just either during or after COVID, and it's called Wiser Than Me, and she interviews women who are older than she is and who have more life than she is, and she is in her, I'm gonna say late 50s. I think she's in her early 60s. Thank you. And she goes out of her way to let and these are like the creme de la creme. It's Patti Smith, it's Jane Fonda, it's Jane Goodall, it's Sally Field, like all the ones. And one of the things she said that after doing sort of a full season, that the one thing that bonded all these women together, or that sort of made it interesting, is that every single one of them, I'm going to get this right, I'm going to quote her. She says, they have all fought and worked and earned the right to be themselves. And I just kept thinking, now in this last chapter of their lives, themselves at last. Why do we have to wait until we are flipping 75 to be ourselves?
Did you? I don't know if you remember this from Ossia Bradley's section of the book. I love that story. Ossia Bradley is what I like to call a FinTech godmother to all of us. So if you don't know her, you get to know her. We're doing an event in San Francisco together. Anyways, in November. Anyways, buy your tickets. But there's a story in there where she talks about how she met an older woman who was like, to that point where she was like, I'm still, and I think this woman was in her 60s, and she's like, I'm just trying to, stay quiet so I can kick ass later. And Ossie was like,
don't wait.
Later? Are you going to kick ass from your grave? Like, when are we kicking at? Like, when is later?
Yeah.
And I think that the ending of that story is that if we don't take the ownership to start kicking ass unapologetically now and start doing it even younger, it's really what I love about the Gen Zers. I know I look like a Gen Zer, but I'm not. I'm actually a millennial. Anyways, I get woo millennials. LOL on that. But anyways, in the club. Okay. Because they have the information at their fingertips to be more unapologetically authentic, to be themselves.
Yeah.
And I do see more, I think, gratitude a little bit, because they have the the TikTok, and they have the social media and the information. There's the downsides of that, but they have the information to be able to say, oh, I get to know about that woman that came before me, and I should say thank you. Yeah. In my own way. I think you can never give a woman more flowers. Like always give women their flowers.
And I think there's enough space. Generation. And we talked a lot about we've talked about this a lot, but I fundamentally believe that intergenerational leadership is the only way we are gonna make it through what's coming next. Folks.
Yep.
And I don't see there being any other option, which by design means we have to start working together better.
Yep.
Absolutely.
No, I agree. I think it's something I'm really proud of. I know in this room right now, right, there are women in their 50s, there are women in their 20s in this room right now. Yeah, we span. I'm like, I already know who's in Gen Z and who is in Millennial and who is in Gen X. That is incredible. I because of my age, I know that I might just naturally attract younger women or women my age, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But I've been so proud at the way that that I'm sorry, like I hate saying older women, but you know what I mean. You queens, you elder queens who came before us. But I love the way that they've shown up.
Wise.
Seasoned. Thank you. The seasoned wise queens. I literally would not be here without that knowledge. Like the fact that I get to get the knowledge from people younger than me and older than me and use all of that to then decide strategically how to move forward is huge. Why would you deny that ever, right?
Yeah. And that sort of, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I just think that, like if you imagine that us being ourselves individually is a superpower, imagine if we could collectively be ourselves across generations, like we could rock the world, right? And
Exactly.
I do think that that's what's going to be needed, right? Which is probably a good segue into, this lovely place that you outline quite well. And most folks in this room already know these statistics, but some of the statistics around the gap, the funding gaps. And I'd love to hear, I coined a new term for you, and I think we're going to share it.
Okay, we should.
But I think you can actually, no, it's a gift to you. You can have it.
Aw.
But
You can use it.
I might say something about it and give you full credit for the inspiration.
You can do anything you want.
So talk a little bit about that when you talk about, so talk about the 2%, because that's, we all have to remember and how that's problematic. But you talk a little bit about the gap between their efforts and the need for systemic change. And I really loved that. And I thought, ooh, you know what that is? That's the exhaustion gap.
Ooh,
right?
That's your book.
But this is the exhaustion gap, right?
Aren't we exhausted? I'm 30, I'm exhausted.
I'm fucking tired. I'm sorry.
You must be
I'm
exhausted.
I'm really exhausted. But I just and that's part of the problem, right? Because every day we have to wake up and we have to fight.
Yep.
Hopefully more together than apart. But when we do it, we have to recognize that all we're doing most of the time is putting our finger in the dam, and the water is pushing the entire thing kind of over the top of us. And that there is, and thank goodness for this, has been a significant amount of warriors. And I would say that our team is part of this journey, fighting for systemic change, doing it when it's not popular, doing it when it's hard, doing it when nobody wants you to do it.
Doing it when no one wants to give you money to do it.
And I honestly, I used to say that the original system in the world of financial services was built and paid for and by and for white men hundreds of years ago. And so of course it's going to take time to dismantle that and get it right. But how dare we, when we're funding new companies and building new companies, particularly as early stage investors, if we get it wrong now, shame on us, right? But then I was thinking a little bit about your exhaustion gap, and I think that it's actually a little bit more complex, right? Because if you're working that hard to change a system, but knowing if you're working that hard to show up every day to do the work, but then the system is sort of against you, it's more than just the funding, right? It is about how we work together to push this, because we need systems change. Systems are not turned around overnight, folks.
No.
This is not even a 10, 20, 30-year game, right? It's hundreds of years, and we have seen some cracks, but it's not enough.
Well, and you knew that going into Anthemis.
Yeah.
So I guess I might reverse the question, and I might have you answer first. How did you maybe start to push forward? Because some of the tidbits of your story, and which obviously you can read all about Amy in the book, chapter 3. Anyways, if you want to mark it, and there are the quotes in there that you were laughed out of rooms because because of your ideas. I'm sorry, that's you were laughed out of rooms. You tried to tell the powers that be what was coming. Yeah. You had this intuition that I honestly, now that I'm reflecting, literally in this moment, as I'm reflecting back on my own journey, I kind of had it too. When you read the introduction of my book and my story, which is kind of hard, it was hard for me to write that. But I kind of had this intuition as well. Yeah. That women's stories were going to be the key driver to change our economy. That women were going to, now look what's happening. We might have a woman who's going to change our economy. Anyways, please, all pairs at the same time. Okay, good. And and so I kind of had this intuition too. So I guess, how did you deal with the laughed out of rooms, leaving such a high position?
How am I still dealing with it?
They're still laughing, baby.
I think, look, there was a healthy dose of one of the reasons why intergenerational leadership works really well is that I was young enough and naive enough to actually think I could make a difference.
All right, dope.
Which, when you're in that space, we need that energy, because you get to a certain point, you're like, am I really making a difference? Does it really matter if I show up today? And that, it's and I find my fuel in watching newbies come in and be like, we can change the world. I'm like, yes, thank God. somebody else can do it too. And so
give me a break.
It was intuition. I was like my job has always been, because again, in this sort of, I was off to the side a little bit. So I was watching the signals and ignoring the noise. And so I was able to spot some of these trends really early. But early in this particular moment, we started investing as Anthemis was 2008, and we started to raise capital. Our first meeting to raise capital, we went to the New York Stock Exchange and Barclays on the Monday, the day that Lehman collapsed, which, if any of you can remember that moment, might not have been the best time to raise capital, with a thesis that was something out of Carlotta Perez's book that was like, our job is to change the fundamental trajectory of the economy through the access of digital technology, like glazed over. And so there was a moment where we just had to bet on ourselves. And that's what we did. My partner, Sean, and I just said, there's no one that's going to understand this. There's no one that's going to see this. There's no one that's even going to let us in a room. So we got to bet on us. And so we took a chance, and we put everything we had into building this platform. And, the risk associated with that is quite large. And so maybe that's why on the days that it was really tough, I was able to get up and go another day. But right. I think, that was like not that long ago, 2008. But what I think was really invigorating and incredibly energizing is that by 2000, like that first round of employees were another bunch of weirdos, right? Like people that also got left out of rooms and were like, oh, maybe there are more of us. And then it became, as we built the ecosystem, like, oh, there's a lot more of us. Oh, you guys, some of these weirdos are working inside the bank still. Oh, we can talk to them. We can go get them. Yeah. Let's go talk to them. And some of them are regulators. Whoa, some of them are teacher, and so we built that ecosystem, and then it started to become viral, right? And that's what you hope for in the best case scenario, particularly when you're professing to be a systems change agent. You want something that has a certain amount of virility to it, so that the work isn't so hard and you're not on your own. But it doesn't get any easier. I mean, right. I think that's the thing that often surprises people. It surprises me some days when I wake up and somebody's like, oh, well, you guys are just doing so well, so we don't need to support you, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but but you never supported us, and you weren't here 10 years ago, so why can't we have
literally?
So
no, I mean, I thank you, Amy. I like hearing those stories, because I think all of us who can relate to what Amy just shared, and exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it's the same old tired thing that keeps happening to us over and over again. Yeah. And that's why I find so much importance in, well, one, I think I want to point out that you picked a fabulous partner to do this with, which I also picked a fabulous partner to do this with, because yes.
And I should shout out, I also picked a personal partner to do this with.
Did you really?
Well, I mean, he's in the room, so you got.
We had that in common. Oh my God, we have this in common.
But it is true. Like you have to have, and actually, it's part of like the. I love the part of the book that talks about. I think it's Liza that talks about her. The kind of rules. When I get to lessons, but I think this idea that like. We have a duty and responsibility, not only to those who are coming after us, but to those who came before us, right? To keep it going. And I want to talk for a second about duty and responsibility, because I've been doing a lot of deep diving on AI lately. And I've got a wonderful opportunity at Money 2020. We're going to do some chatting with Sarah Fryer.
And I'm excited about
that. In my wormhole of AI, the thing I keep going back to is this sort of sense of responsibility that those of us in the technology community have with the stuff that we build and the stuff that we perpetuate. And so you talk a lot about kind of duty responsibility. I'm going to read another quote. I've got two more left to read, but this is, by bridging finance and technology together, creating fintech, I witnessed a surge of female entrepreneurs and business leaders who recognized that placing humanity at the center of our financial systems was the key to unlocking growth. And then later you go on to talk about the idea that essentially, women in fintech, the recurring pattern that emerges among them is that they often view their achievements or advantages as a duty to contribute to their communities. Their ethos mirrors the adage of, and I love this one, build longer tables, not higher walls. No matter what, in the face of success or failure, they remain steadfast to sustainability and progress. Like
Yeah.
we do have that
Y'all do
responsibility,
that.
right?
Y'all be doing that. It's true.
And we do. We have a duty and responsibility. And I think,
Yeah.
if nothing else, your book was a great reminder of that, and hopefully something we can all take for that. All right, I'm going to wrap up in a minute, but because I do have like a little something for you. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, Nicole, was I took the lessons very seriously from some of the folks that that are some of our friends that I know, but like. Liza, her kind of, taking self-inventory annually and establishing her own, she talks about a sort of non-negotiable list, and Sally's personal board of directors, and Luli, is Luli here tonight?
No, Lule is, I know, she's in DC.
Okay, well, I mean, she
said she was going to throw me another party.
She's got so many good nuggets in there. I love there's a great one about chewing an elephant, so I'll let you guys read that one. And for me, like, it's always been about knowing your own personal charter, right?
Yep.
Like, what is it that gets you up and makes you tick? What is like the number one lesson you want the readers to take from this book?
Oh, there's so many in 90,000 words. For me, I think the big lesson is to bet on yourself and bet on each other. And the only way to create cycles where women have wealth is if we are also financially independent. Period.
Yep. Period.
If as women we're financially independent, we can then put money into other women's pockets, and then we're creating cycles and systems where we hire women, where we fund women, where women get to then build the companies that need to get off the ground to be able to create the products that women so desperately need in the financial system. That for me is the key takeaway, is also you belong here, like what kind of
and
kind of bullshit narrative told us, the women who built the rails of this industry to begin with? Her name's Grace Hopper. Thank you. The first woman, the first coder is a woman, Ada Lovelace. Do not tell me that I don't belong here, or that I'm not technical enough, or that I don't look the part. I haven't built a fintech company yet, but I look forward to when I do that.
But you will.
But you know what I mean? Like, or even as a writer covering fintech, don't tell me that, what does she know? She never worked at a fintech company. I interview hundreds of people all the time. Anyway.
I love that. I mean, if everyone could walk out of this room knowing that A, you belong here, and B, you're not alone. That, exactly. I think, is
perfectly summarized.
Perfectly summarized. Perfectly. Okay, I promised you that I had a little treat for you.
I know. I have no idea what's happening.
It's not
right
that
now.
big of a deal. But I did say I've been going down the rabbit hole of AI, and one of the things that I've been quite fascinated by is when sort of the human and the machine get together and try to get your physical essence.
Ooh, what'd you ask ChatGPT?
Oh, I asked them to write me a poem about Nicole Casperson. And this is what we got.
Oh, goodness.
You ready?
I'm excited.
Nicole, a symphony of voices. In the heartbeat of New York, where stories collide, there's a spark ignited, a dream untried. Nicole Casperson, with a pen as her sword, crafts narratives bold, where equity's adored. Journalism's her canvas, a vibrant array, where finance meets heart and voices convey. B2B media, where the stories unfold, housing autofans with precision and bold. Yet she saw the silence, the void in the frame. Diverse female voices, it was time to reclaim. So she forged her own way with vision so clear. FinTech is femme, a chorus we cheer. 50,000 souls in her inaugural flight, a community blossomed, together they write. Women and allies, a dynamic embrace, reshaping the systems, carving out space. In every article penned, every insight shared, Nicole is the voice of the dreamers who dared. With purpose unwavering, her mission defined, to weave equity's fabric, a future aligned. So here's to Nicole, a beacon, a guide, in a world where the stories of many reside. With every bold stroke, she's changing the game. In the symphony of voices, we'll never be the same.
Oh my God. Amy. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Humans of Fintech. If you loved it, be sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.